I started wanting to make things when I was just very young, and I was lucky enough that my grandfather was a furniture maker, and I used to hang around in his workshop, and so I started making things very, very early. And then I think I was probably maybe 12 or 13 years old. My grandmother gave me, my other grandmother gave me a book on violin making that just, fired the enthusiasm. And I couldn't think about anything else because I enjoyed music, and somehow the woodworking and the music just kind of merged. And so I couldn't stop thinking about it, and all I did was try to find a way to be able to learn violin making. I tried getting, being apprenticed in workshops here and there. One time I went to, I think I was 17 years old. I went to Copenhagen in Denmark, and I had gotten a position as an apprentice in the workshop of Merling was the name of the shop, a beautiful old violin making shop. And the day that I came to Copenhagen, Mr. Merling died. So that was a dead end. Eventually I found out about the violin making school in England, in Newark, Nottinghamshire. And it had not such a long history. It had been running for maybe 4 or 5 years before I came there. But there were some fantastic teachers there. And in the years that I was at the Newark School of Violin Making, there was a huge group of people really, really passionate and enthusiastic about rediscovering the Italian method of violin making. And interestingly, in that time, there weren't enough old Baroque instruments, because all the violins, violas and cellos that had been Baroque initially, in the 18th century, they had all been changed in the 19th century into modern setups. But there was this great movement of Baroque music in Europe, and there was the scarcity of Baroque instruments. So all of a sudden, violin makers had tons of commissions to make Baroque instruments. But it kind of sparked a new kind of wave of quality and enthusiasm in violin making. And it was just an amazing time. The students that were in the school with me, there were only 12 of us in each year, 3 years, from all over the world. And there was just an amazing dynamic. But that was a really, really special time, and we did a lot of activities outside of the school, actually getting in touch with museums and interviewing curators about old painting techniques, and researching literature from the 18th, 17th and 18th centuries on varnish making, and just an explosion in a way of enthusiasm. most of my colleagues went on to either do the business side of violin making, buying and selling old instruments, expertise, and restoration and repairs. But I was very adamant that I only wanted to make new instruments. And so I possibly had a harder time in the beginning, because it's very difficult to be a 20-year-old and have the trust of your client, because the stereotypical violin maker was gray-haired, glasses, clogs, that type of thing. But I persevered, and I also decided never to do too many reproductions or copies, because all of the fantastic masters of the 17th and 18th centuries in Italy, immediately after having done their apprenticeship with their master, they would go out on their own and design their own shapes, and therefore there was a huge flora of different things going on, and sort of personal characteristics in the style of each maker, which unfortunately, to my mind, for the past maybe 50 years or so, or more even, people have been slavishly copying the old masters, which is it's great if you're in an educational environment. You need to have some sort of reference, and it's absolutely necessary in the beginning. But there are also other makers who design all their models, and I think that's the way to go. So when I finished my studies at Newark, the Newark School of Violin Making in Nottinghamshire in England, and I moved back to Iceland, and it was quite difficult, because there was no violin maker here when I arrived, and I got stuck in a lot of repairs which I wasn't interested in doing. So we decided, my wife and I, to try to move to Central Europe somewhere. At the time, my parents were living in Luxembourg, which seemed ideal, because it's really central in Europe, and there was a good orchestra, a good symphony orchestra, but no violin maker. So we decided to have a go, and we were going to spend 2 years then. We spent 12 years in Luxembourg. I worked in a 12th century castle on top of a hill in the middle of a forest in a tiny village not far from where we lived, and it was just an ideal place to concentrate on actual making. So it was a good time to really concentrate, and very, very little communication with other people, which was great, because I'm a bit of a hermit anyway, to start with. So 12 years in Luxembourg, that was a good time. I learned a lot. I made a lot of instruments there. Occasionally people commission an instrument, and then they're taking part in the whole process from the beginning. So very often they have ideas about what kind of sound they want, whether they want a bright or a dark sound, things to do with the setup, which are ergonomically important for them, how far the strings are from the board and so on, how the bridge is set up. But sometimes I make instruments for dealers here and there, well, in New York and London, because I'm not a particularly fine salesman. I'd rather spend my time at the bench and then pay somebody else to sell them. So that happens a lot. But it's nice when people are actually involved and they want to, like, sometimes people come and they want to follow the process, you know, and even sometimes, you know, to have a go at, you know, using the tools and so on. Yeah. Years and years ago, I had this dream of gathering all the instruments that I had made. I've made a lot of instruments, and many of them are here in Iceland. And I thought it would be a fantastic idea to hear them all at once. And it was a kind of dream that percolated within me for many years. And so about 2 or 3 years ago, I started to sort of kind of formulate a way in which I could do that. And in 1980, when I finished my studies in Newark in England, I showed 4 or 5 instruments in Ásmundarssalur, which is right in the center of Reykjavik next to the cathedral. And it's a beautiful old venue. So I decided that it might be beautiful to actually make another exhibition 40 years later. And I got my daughter to be the kind of curator of the look of the thing. She made a beautiful kind of exhibit, you know, in the space, and with the colors, and the colors she chose to be exactly the opposite to the instrument colors and so on. And I managed to get together, I think probably just under 50 instruments. And then every day at noon we had an event. We had lectures, talks, conversations with musicians, and then performances on some of the instruments. And it was packed every single day. It was packed full of people. Honestly, I expected there to be 3 people showing up, but it went far, you know, above the expectations that I had. So downstairs in the pit, we had, I had a collection of, I call them sketches. They're like sculptures that are ideas about new shapes for violins, which I like to fool around with sometimes because, well, you have to have fun as well. I mean, I actually have made stringed instruments that have something more to do with 20th century architecture than the Baroque shapes that classically we are using, and with an astounding degree of violin-like sounds coming out of them, even though they're shaped, they're all shell shapes, like the shell-shaped structures that were designed in the 60s, and down there in the pit, I had a few of those sculptures, and a few. I also had parts of a sound installation that I did years ago, 2007, and then also we had a few instruments that I've done in collaboration with my son Ulfur Jóhannsson, and he's a composer, musician, but he's also extremely clever at electronics and the kind of ideology behind electronic music. So we've made kind of a few hybrid instruments. His main contribution to that was his electronic harp, which is a circular harp which has strings on the inside, and they're all driven by electromagnets with touch sensors on the outside. But of course made from beautiful pieces of walnut in the workshop. And a lot of fun to do that. So the final culmination of the festival was an old egocentric dream of mine, to hear all these instruments together. But we had two other pieces. One is a beautiful quartet by Maria Hult Markan, and called Vanished Woods, which was played by the Siggi Quartet. And then a piece by my son Ulfur and Gyða Valtýsdóttir, a piece called Onium Ion, which is it's a piece actually written by the two of them. So, and it's a work for orchestra and solo cello. So there was quite a nice variety going on there. So Metamorphosen for me was the perfect piece to sort of make this dream come true. But I'd never dreamt of being able to gather that many instruments in one spot. But actually it took about 2 years to kind of organize the whole thing. And choice of music as well. I spent a lot of time with Bjarni Frímann Bjarnason, the conductor. He's extremely knowledgeable about the whole repertoire for strings, and we went through all the possibilities. We ended up choosing the Richard Strauss Metamorphosen, which is written for 23 solo voices, which is interesting because there's a lot of interchange. There's a lot of solos being played back and forth in the orchestra, and also the Strauss piece it's basically a wall of sound for the whole time, and this was for me particularly interesting to be able to hear, you know, what the instruments could do in a situation like that. And I was totally amazed at how many musicians decided to take part in the festival. And some of them remembered the first exhibit that I put up there in Ásmundarsalur, but then now, 40 years later, it was the whole lot of instruments, and the musicians were just amazing, and I was so grateful that they all wanted to be there and play. That dream kind of just came true.